16, as amended by Executive Order 65, issued by the Governor of Tennessee in connection with the COVID emergency. The public has been invited to attend, and the meeting is being recorded and will be available for viewing in the future on YouTube. In addition, in order for us to continue a virtual meeting, we need to have a motion from the board that it is necessary to conduct essential board business. And so with that in mind, I think we should entertain a motion.
I move the motion.
Motion's made, it's properly seconded by the chair.
And we will do all roll call votes. Chair Purcell, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Thaden is absent. Commissioner Ansari?
Aye.
Commissioner Coleman?
Aye.
Commissioner Batts? She's not present yet. Commissioner Campbell?
Aye.
Commissioner Bowers is absent. The vote is 4-0 in favor of the motion.
So, this is LaTanya. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Emily is on the line. We're trying to get her to where she can be heard. Robert, I just text Robert to set her up.
Hi, this is Emily. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. I vote yes.
Okay. Okay, so it's 5-0 and 2, Ms. Bowers and Commissioner Batts not present.
Do we expect Commissioner Batts?
Yes, LaTanya, can you check on Commissioner Batts?
Yes, I'll do that.
Thank you.
Right, we have both a quorum and the necessary votes for us to proceed under the governor's executive orders. So I find that this meeting is properly convened and called to order. Under the agenda that was previously released, there's an opportunity for public comments, as there always is at the time of our meetings. Have we received any requests for public comment?
Not to my knowledge. Jamie, we received any requests for public comment? No.
She's right there. She did just.
Yeah, she's nodding now.
She said no. No, we received none.
We have an affirmative visual confirmation that there has been no request for public comment, and our executive director confirms that as well. So we'll move to agenda item number 4. Before doing that, let me ask, can everyone hear us from this room? Can you hear, is the sound good? Can you hear us?
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Good. And obviously, I think something that Commissioner Thaden has done often, she has checked to make sure everyone else is in a position to communicate. We know that Commissioner Thaden can be heard. Commissioner Coleman, I believe, can we hear you? Would you try your sound for us, please?
Yes, I can hear you. There's a bit of an echo, but I can hear good enough.
Good, thank you very much. And Commissioner Campbell, I believe I've heard your voice. Can you unmute? If you can just unmute for a moment, Bishop Campbell, and let us hear your voice.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Perfect.
All right.
Perfect. Commissioner Ansari is here with me. So we're now on agenda item number 4. This morning, the Management Review Committee met in announced session and reviewed the discussions that this board and the committee itself has had previously regarding the selection of an interim executive director and the basic recommendations that were provided to us earlier this week in the report and recommendations of the Transition Research Committee, which was chaired by Dr. Crooms. You will recall that the board received Dr. Crooms' report and the report of the committee and formally did so at our meeting on Tuesday. Informed by that report, as well as the discussions of the committee over the previous weeks, we have this morning considered those matters and have now 3 resolutions to bring to you for the purpose of allowing this agency to continue to operate in the months ahead. The board is well aware that our executive director, after 7 years of service as our executive director, has previously provided to us his formal resignation, which is effective December the 4th. As a result, this board and the Management Review Committee has been aware of the need to appoint an interim executive director and then move forward with the process of finding and then selecting an executive director to continue to lead the agency. In that process this morning, the Management Review Committee was well aware and informed by the recommendation of our committee chaired by Dr. Kroom that we should establish an interim director or team responsible for the day-to-day operation of the agency to handle public relations, communications. The process should also designate from the board a group or person who will serve as the board transition team to manage the process relating to the replacement of the executive director, as well as to provide communications to the board. And further finding was that we should ensure the interim director is capable of keeping the organization's key functions operational until the new executive director is selected. I think from the chair's perspective, and I believe the perspective of the Management Review Committee, critical to this thinking was finding an individual that the board would be able to communicate with, would have confidence in, would have the trust of, and be trusted by. A person, hopefully, who would know the operations of this agency, both in the past and the present, as well as the expectations and hopes that the agency has at this important time. So well summarized by our Executive Director, Jim Harbison, during his report to the board just Tuesday of this week. Having gone through that process of consideration this morning, it is the recommendation of the Management Review Committee that this board would appoint our counsel, Saul Solomon, to act as the interim director for this agency going forward. We have a second recommendation to the board that we would ask Dr. Kroom to lead the search for a new executive director. This was something that we have discussed previously within the committee in particular, but also I think will be clear as we move forward, the importance not only of the search, but that the search proceed in a way that is not distracting to the interim director or the staff of the agency. Dr. Kroom, having given, I think, extraordinary service to us, and as recognized by many board members' comments, we believe is the ideal person, frankly, and I'm not afraid to say perfect person, to be on point in the leading of the search process going forward. And then finally, it is our recommendation that for the purpose of maintaining communications in the search process with this board, that the Management Review Committee would be the natural and appropriate body to continue that process. We believe it's within the description of the Management Review Committee and certainly within the work that we have been doing. And so with that explanation and background, and for the purpose of proceeding with those motions and also for discussion as the board may choose to have it, I would begin with the first resolution, which comes from the Management Review Committee to you, and that is that the Board of Commissioners of MDHA hereby appoints Saul Solomon as interim executive director of MDHA effective November 30, 2020, in accordance with the terms and provisions which were reviewed at the special meeting of the Board of Commissioners held on November 13, 2020. That is the motion that comes from the Management Review Committee, and I make that motion now for the purpose of discussion. Is there a second?
Second, and I have a question.
Yes, not only may you have a question, but we can have discussion, and I want to also say that I will review the terms at the appropriate time. Following your question, Commissioner Coleman, you're recognized.
How long are we anticipating the search to take place? I mean, how long are we expecting the search to take?
I think the best answer is the one that Dr. Kroom provided both for the committee as well as more briefly in the board meeting. She felt that as a matter of practice and experience nationally, that it could be in the range of 9 months, could be as little as 6, could be more than 9 months, but within the course of this next year, it should be completed. And I think 9 months is the operating period to consider. Could be sooner, and certainly, for me personally, sooner is better, and probably for Mr. Solomon as well. But that's, I think, the range that she identified, and I'm comfortable with that number of a goal of 9 months.
Okay, because it sounded like you were going beyond 9 months, and I think extending it too long is not a good thing. So I hope it doesn't take as long as 9 months, but I want it to be thorough and that we get the exactly right person.
Thank you for the comment. And let me say, speaking as your colleague, I agree. Other questions at this time?
This is Emily. My question is, since Saul has been our incredible board counsel, how will that work? And is it still his firm supporting us at this point?
Right. Well, I will begin the answer, and then if Mr. Solomon wishes to add anything, he certainly is entitled to do so. From my perspective, as the chair and also as a lawyer, in fact, it works better than ever. And let me explain what I mean by that. First of all, it means that we have Mr. Solomon in a position to provide not just advice and leadership and communication during board meetings or committee meetings, but as the interim director, he's there as much and as often as is needed for us and for the entire agency. So from my perspective, you have more access, more advice, and more leadership from Mr. Solomon than we've ever had. Secondly, in terms of going forward, it is the Management Review Committee discussed this morning. It is not the norm that separate counsel in all other agencies provides the legal support. We have a general counsel here at MDHA. The general counsel and the staff here certainly are in a position to provide the legal advice whenever it is necessary. And as we know, the general counsel also has innumerable other lawyers that are currently on contract and available whenever that is required. So from my perspective, Emily, we have our lawyer, the board lawyer, in a position of being the interim director, which means that every decision will be going through that filter, if you will, of a lawyer executive director. From a board perspective, you'll have his advice available to you at any time, and to the extent that separate legal advice is necessary, he has indicated a desire, a willingness, and I'm very supportive of this, to bring the general counsel and the staff more fully into alignment with the board for the purpose of answering questions as well as providing leadership. The minutes do not need to be ultimately provided by counsel to the board. The minutes, which are already being generated internally to the agency, will now still come to our interim director and to the board for its consideration. So from my perspective, we get more of Saul Solomon, and that's a good thing.
That is a good thing. Thank you for clarifying.
Certainly. Other questions? And while you're thinking about that, let me outline the terms that were discussed with, negotiated with, and resolved, and come to you now as the recommendation as a part of this resolution. Saul will continue as counsel from the outside, as we just discussed. The board has asked its outside counsel to perform the functions of interim director while a search for the new executive director is conducted. And that is, I think, not only understandable, but there's certainly precedent for that and will be understood, we believe, by both the public and also by the team here at MDHA, who has worked so long, in fact, worked longer with the staff and executive team here than has any current board member, quite frankly. And during this time, he will continue his employment with Klein, Solomon, Mills, which is the basis for his existing relationship with MDHA. The scope will be, Saul will provide leadership and guidance to MDHA staff during the interim period. He will be the interim director. He'll work as many hours as it takes with no minimum and no maximum. And I think that is certainly the experience we've had with our existing executive director and the kind of commitment we would expect, but it's explicit to the terms that we have reached. And as currently, the work can be done either physically here at MDHA or remotely, as is obviously the work being done by many, both in the agency and on the board now. I think it was a good thing for Saul to be clear about that during the period of this pandemic, and we appreciate that. In terms of the initial process, we have agreed that Saul will seek staff input as to what matters need attention in the first 30, 60, 90, and 120 days. That was his formulation, and the notion there was that he would very quickly get from staff their own sense of the priorities, what's right in front of us, what's just beyond that, what's beyond that, and so forth, so that he would be clear and ultimately the board would be clear about what's coming during the period of this transition. He will prioritize these matters and then come back to the board to get consensus as to our priorities, which is something that this board has regularly, I think, discussed, and certainly both of the chairs, both of our other committee chairs of development and finance have been very clear in their desires in that regard. And he has agreed that he will provide an interim plan to us by January the 1st, 2021. And that should be a plan that certainly the board during its December meeting can have thoughts about and share, but ultimately will be provided to us by the first of the year, roughly 3.5 weeks or so after he has actually stepped into the position. For compensation, the term sheet sets out his current rate for counsel to the board, and this is so that we can put into context, I think, what numbers I'm about to give you. He has been paid $300 an hour in that role, a rate that is unchanged since 2017. It's not in the term sheet, but it's actually one of the lower legal rates, your chair can tell you, in the city of Nashville for persons of his experience and maturity. In the case of the actual payment terms, he would be paid $24,000 per month in 1099 fees moving forward and until an executive director is named. For us to have context as to what that means or an understanding of what that means, $24,000 per month amounts to $288,000 on an annualized basis. If you think about that monthly payment, that's what the annual salary would be, so that you as the board can have an understanding about how that fits into the larger salary scheme, if you will, both here and in the world. The current executive director, has a base salary of $173,138 per year. His compensation includes a 15% retirement benefit, which is valued at $25,970 a year. He has a FICA contribution of valued at $8,537 per year, and his health plan is currently valued at approximately $15,000 per year. When those numbers are all put together and understanding, and Mr. Solomon will not have those additional, that helps you understand where this compensation is in relation to what we are currently paying and obligated to do. The fifth and final set of understandings or outline of terms, if you will, is that Saul, because he is a lawyer and has clients currently, that he will be allowed to continue to represent other clients. But he has agreed, and I say this for the record, to ensure the needs of the agency are met while serving as interim director. One of the questions that arose this morning in the Management Review Committee is an appropriate question, the question of conflicts of interest. And the good news, I think, both as your chair and as a lawyer, is that he is the one individual that I have the highest level of confidence does not have conflicts of interest with this agency, because as a lawyer and our lawyer, he's been required every day to consider and review whether or not his undertaking representation would be in conflict with his other client, that is to say, us. That is not just a moral obligation, it is a legal obligation, it is an ethical obligation, and his law license actually is contingent or dependent upon his maintaining no conflicts of interest between clients And so I have a high level of confidence that not only is he personally committing to ensure that the needs of the agency are met, but to avoid potential conflicts of interest. He has agreed and volunteered to turn down work, additional new work that would cause a great deal of personal involvement, but may still accept work that others in his firm can do. And he has agreed to one more thing, that he will not be a candidate for the executive director position. And now let me say something to the whole board that I believe the Management Review Committee early on agreed about, and which is important not only to the board, but to, I think, the public and especially all those who work here at MDHA. The Management Review Committee had and has a very strong feeling that the interim director should not be a candidate for the executive director's position. We believe that as a best practice for this agency, and in my experience, all agencies, that is indeed what should always be the hoped for goal, that it allows in this way all those who would be candidates, whether they are inside the agency or outside the agency, to go into the search process with the clear understanding that the interim director is, as to that process, not a candidate and not involved. And as we move into the discussion of the search process, let me say a little bit in advance that we have agreed and believe that the interim director should not be a member of the search committee or part of the decision-making process for the new executive director, so as to make sure that everyone inside the agency and outside the agency knows that we start this with an open mind, with an open process, and with a certainty that at the end of it all, we simply want the best possible person for MDHA and its mission, and for our obligations to the larger world. And there is no bias for or from the interim director in regards to the outcome of that process. So he is committed to not being a candidate for that position, and frankly, that fulfilled an important early agreement within the Management Review Committee that if at all possible, we did not believe the interim should be, and nor will he be, a candidate for the executive director's position. Those are the terms. You have the motion before you. And let me again ask, are there any questions or discussion?
Yes, discussion.
Please, you're recognized, Commissioner Paul.
Did you get a second?
Yes, we have a second.
Okay, great. I have several questions, and just as the review committee felt strongly that the interim should not be involved, should not be a candidate for the permanent position, nor be involved in the process, I have a problem with, basically we're saying this can be a part-time interim position, and he will maintain his other legal things. And I understand the necessity for that, but I have a big problem with that. And the reason I have a big problem with that is we're basically saying that the work of the executive director can be part-time, and I don't believe that it can be. I don't want that kind of a message or inference to go out to potential candidates. That's right. One issue. That's one issue that I have. The second issue, and I may have,
Could we address that first? Could we just
Sure.
deal with that right at the top? Because it is not a part-time position in that way, and I agree with you. What this is saying is that, in fact, the terms specifically say that this work, he will work as many hours as it takes with no minimum or maximum at all. And we know this candidate and this lawyer. I assure you, in my opinion, it will be a full-time effort on his part. It does, however, as in the case of any number of, whenever particularly lawyers take on new positions, they have existing clients and obligations. There's nothing in this that suggests that it's a part-time position. And I fully expect that just as there were for Mr. Harbison, there will be many weeks when the work far exceeds 40 hours. And indeed, there is no minimum in this specifically because we understand that. And Mr. Solomon, I don't know if you want to address your thinking on that subject or not.
I have one client in particular that I'm about, hopefully it's going to wind down soon, but it's a very important project, and I feel very committed to that client as well. After that, and hopefully that will clear it up by the end of the year. After that, I don't anticipate any client taking up a great deal of time. Most of my practice is I'm mostly the sales guy for the firm. I go out and try to get work and then have others perform work that's needed. I'm at a stage in my career where I don't really didn't anticipate this position, but I was really not wanting to work full time until this opportunity came. So I hope that clears that up. I don't anticipate a lot of my time being spent on anything other than this. So I do have an obligation to one client in particular.
Okay, you were breaking up, so I'm not sure I heard you. I heard the one client that you're committed to and you think it'll go through the end of the year, and I'm not sure what else you said, but that's not important to repeat it. And I understand, Chair Purcell, that we said no minimum nor a maximum. My concern, having gone through an almost identical issue, but not with a lawyer in the interim position, was that legal things only take place from 9 to 5 in terms of court appearances, and maybe research and other stuff can go on at other times. And a lot of MDHA work goes on from 9 to 5. And I know we have a staff to do that. I just want the record to reflect that that is a concern that I have, and hopefully it will be worked out to the benefit of everybody and such that MDHA is not wanting.
I understand the concern. I think you were registering it is appropriate. It certainly was something the Management Review Committee thought about, and I agree with you and believe that it will be resolved in a way that will not leave MDHA wanting. As I indicated in the term sheets, he must and will ensure that the needs of the agency are met during this period of time, and I'm confident of that. Thank you. I'm glad you raised that point.
I have another point, unless somebody else has one, and I'll wait.
No, you go ahead, I think, and then we'll call on someone else.
Okay, you know I'm not good at numbers, but I think the total package compensation for the current executive director is about $237, and I could be wrong. I'm not good at numbers, and that we're the annualized for the interim is $288. Is there a reason for the difference, and how will that impact the budget?
Well, I think the reason for the difference in part is that we received, as you will recall, from our executive director, a considerable amount of information concerning the current market in the larger world. And so at this point, this is within that range for compensation for comparable positions as provided to us by Mr. Harbison. And it is also a reflection of the
Opportunity costs.
The opportunity costs, actually, Commissioner Ansari points out the opportunity costs of what it is required to have this position filled by this person at this time. One of the things that it's not a simple thing to find someone who is in a position to provide just 6 to 9 months of service, and in this case, we believe that this is an appropriate and negotiated amount of compensation that meets our needs and meets the needs of Mr. Solomon as well. And let me say, as your chair, I'm comfortable with this amount for this purpose for this period of time. And I'm reasonably confident, based upon what Mr. Harbison has indicated in the past, that we should be able to, and our finance team as well, that we should be able to fill any gap between the two numbers, if indeed those are the numbers that turn out to be true. We should have, it should not have an impact on our budget.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board?
So the only thing I would say related to this is part of it. Again, this is just keying in some other board members to the tenor of the discussions previously. One of the things that I think our chair spoke to, but that we wanted to be very specific about, is that we wanted to to put ourselves in a position where we knew we were up against a bit of a timeline to select. I mean, it's not a hard deadline, right? But we are up against a reasonable timeline because we're asking someone to leave their profession and come serve in a temporary role here, or an interim role. I don't use the word temporary. The position is permanent, but the role that he's filling is an interim role. The second thing is that we really wanted someone who understood what was happening in the agency and had what we believe to be a strong connection to key members inside the organization. Because part of this role is to prepare, and we will go through it. We'll talk about it later about the search process and what that looks like. Is that we expect there to be internal candidates who are inside of this organization who need prep, who need coaching, and who need guidance in order to put their best foot forward, not for the role, but to expand their influence inside the organization. And one of the things that was particularly attractive about having Saul lead in this interim role, we think he is a leader who is comfortable leading from behind. And so we think with his lead from behind ethos, it will allow us to see more of the capabilities of the people inside of our organization. So though we're not biased to whether we select someone from internal or we select someone externally, right? But what tends to happen is that people only see the shortfalls of the people who are internal to the organization, and they only see the best polishing of the people who are outside of the organization. And so we wanted someone who can help balance that natural tendency along the way. And so that is why, as a member of the Management Resource Committee, why I felt comfortable with this decision, because I think it serves the interim purpose for the role in running the organization and an interim purposes for key leaders who remain inside the organization or expanding their profile.
For chair?
Yes.
For chair.
Yes.
This is Antoinette Batch. Yes, I'm confident in Mr. Saul Solomon leading in the interim position. A great choice. It's a comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Batts. That's much appreciated. Other comments or questions?
This is Emily. I just wanted to thank both of you. You answered all of the questions I had. I think that this has been very thoughtful, and Aoli, your points are very well taken, and I think that that's a great message to be sending internally.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Faden. Thank you, Commissioner Coleman.
I really like an opportunity to uncover the gifts and talents of key people in the agency.
Agreed. Other questions or comments? Are you ready to vote? If you're ready to vote, I will ask, in fact, perhaps I should call the roll. See how confident I am at that. Commissioner Ansari.
Aye.
Commissioner Faden.
Aye.
Commissioner Batts.
Aye.
Commissioner Campbell.
Aye.
Commissioner Coleman.
Aye.
Commissioner Purcell votes aye. Are there any others to be heard? In that case, the motion passes and you adopt. The second resolution from the Management Review Committee this morning was that the Board of Directors of MDHA hereby appoints Dr. Cynthia Kroom, Executive Director of the Metro Action Commission, as the lead executive to conduct the search for a new executive director. That is the motion now before you, which I move. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Ansari. Are there questions or comments? Let me begin by saying it is not, by this process, it is not anticipated that that's all of the process. That is just the start. And we go back to the original document that came to us from Dr. Kroom and her committee. And they are very clear in a large number of recommendations to us about the way in which this process should be conducted, what should be considered, and all of that informs not only her, but us. Secondly, The next resolution revolves around involving the Management Review Committee in the process, but also requiring that the board is involved in this process of search and selection. And I think there is a consensus here, and I hope throughout the board for that purpose. And lastly, it does not prejudge whether there should be, in addition, an external search firm or a local search firm or some other mechanism used to assist. But what it does say is that we're not asking the interim director to run this search. We're asking someone that we've now come to work with and know, and knows us, I think, pretty well, and had relationships, as she described, with others here at the agency as well, because of the overlap of responsibilities between the Metro Action Commission and MDHA, as well as the fact that she's been so long, now 20 plus years, a member of our community. So this is simply for the purpose of getting that search established under a lead who will work directly with us, who is separate and apart from the interim director. And that's the background from the chair's perspective on why we bring that motion to you today. Questions or concerns or comments?
Question.
Mr. Coleman.
Well, I think Emily or somebody was also, let them go first.
Mr. Thaden.
Yes, so I think I'm just trying to get a little clearer on roles and responsibilities. And so I appreciated your comments, Chair. But can you help me understand a bit more by using the word leading, like effectively leading our search? I'm trying to understand and make sure that it's clear to everyone on the call that the authority for hiring an executive director rests with the board. Yes. And so what is the roles and responsibilities that we are asking Ms. Kroom to work with us on, and how will that be structured?
Everyone knows we're on the same page.
Yeah.
So I think to the other members of the board, I think what that we're suggesting by having Dr. Kroom take the lead is that there needs to be a plan to procure two things. There's decisions to be made, and there's a plan to procure. So someone needs to do the work of actually identifying. The best way to identify internal candidates and external candidates is to use an external search firm. That is a recommendation to either the MRC or the board at large, and we will say yes or no. And to whatever answer is, someone will then go execute the details of running an RFP, securing and bring it to the board. Here's what we've received. Here are our recommendations for these reasons. Here's who we recommend that the board use as either external counsel or that we will do it internally. Then from there, what we would expect is that there is an opportunity to go through a job description process that someone will have to coordinate with the board and whoever determined to actually define the job process. Someone actually has to do the interviews, write the document, prepare for, do and work in concert. Like, she will be doing those things, not members of the board and not Saul. Eventually, and let's assume we use a third-party firm, 60 resumes will show up. Someone needs to cull it down to 12. She'll be a part of that process to whatever we define. And eventually what will happen is she will work with the search firm, whether it's an external or our internal search firm, to coordinate the schedules of whoever the interview committee is. That role will be to coordinate our times and schedules to actually review the resumes, interview the candidates, set forth what our interview process is, such that we're all asking uniquely similar questions, so we're all seeing the same things. And ultimately, we would make a decision that she would continue to execute, and probably by that time it's back in HR hands by the time we're getting offer letters, negotiating, blah, 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 blah. We see her as an enabler of the process, not the owner of the outcome.
As the chair, I totally agree.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all right. I just to add, we have agreed that Mr. Solomon cannot and should not and will not run the agency and run the search. The board, as you suggested, has not just the authority, but the obligation to make a choice regarding an executive director. It is our primary, our number one obligation, I would suggest, is to make sure that we have hired the right person to run this agency. But the board, no member of, nor the board as a group, as a committee, is in a position to bring a plan and execute on that plan for a search process. And I think, as Commissioner Ansari indicated, much as Saul Solomon is going to bring us a plan by the first of the year for the priorities and allow us as a board to have input, I would anticipate we would have the same kind of plan brought forward from Dr. Kroon, who has thought more about this to this point, so far as I know, than any of us, because she led the effort that got us to this place. So I frankly have to say, Commissioner Thaden, that it was one of the great offers of service by someone who already does have a full-time job, but did offer to provide this additional assistance to us going forward to bring us hopefully safely home to the place where we want to be, with the new executive director leading this agency for as far into the future as we can see.
That was my next question, actually, was the question of capacity, because clearly Cynthia has so much on her plate already. And will we be offering any compensation?
Yes.
No, there's been no compensation requested, and I don't anticipate at this point that there would be. We can come back and review that after we see the scope of the work, but this is something that she offered. She is a city employee, the city of Nashville, as you know, a community organizer at her heart, and I think much as she gave her time for this purpose to now, she is willing to give her time for this purpose, and there is no, at this point at least, anticipated compensation. Let me say for the record, nor is there, I'm looking at the faces of our commission members here who give not just their Friday mornings, but their Tuesday mornings and lots of other time. It is not an inappropriate thing for a citizen of Nashville to give their time to advance the cause of MDHA. Commissioner Coleman.
Yes, I've heard everything that has been said, and I appreciate the fact that Dr. Kroon is willing to do this. I'm still very confused by the process. It sounds as if we have one person identifying a process, possibly doing a job description. What is the role of MDHA board and other organizations when there is an executive director search? There is a search committee of the board, and I haven't heard if or when that particular committee will exist or not exist. The next thing is, since you worked with the team to develop the report, are the members of that team going to be assisting her, or is this a solo activity? I'm just not clear about how we're moving forward.
Right. I think the answer is there is lots to be decided today about how we move forward. And I would suggest, as your chair, it does not need to be decided today, but does need to be focused on and further consideration between now and the December board meeting. What this motion does is simply ask Dr. Kroon to sit or stand at the front of this process and lead us into it. It does not suggest any outcome at the end, or frankly, as to anything, Dr. Coleman, you may have just said, meaning, it does not direct us as to how we will search as a board. It does not leave in her hands the selection of anything, just to once again begin the process of helping us come up with a plan and lead to the extent necessary through that plan. As to the members of the board, the third motion approved by the Management Review Committee this morning is that the Management Review Committee would continue as board members to, with input from the entire board, be the primary interface with Dr. Kroon in connection with the search process. But it's explicit in saying that this would be, there would be input from the entire board throughout. And so you've got those two pieces, one person on point to bring us a plan for our input and consideration. And I think, obviously she will start with what she's already recommended, but ultimately have to refine it for us, for our input and decision. No plan without us. There's no director without us. There's no plan without us. There's no search without us. And for communication during this interim period, The Management Review Committee has, because of the size of the committee, we have the ability to meet in person to discuss these matters, which frankly has simplified the process getting us to this point. And I think has worked, at least I feel worked well. But all those are the right questions. They are not answered today, and they won't be answered unless and until Dr. Kroom brings us plans and thoughts that we agree to. You're muted. You're still muted.
Dr. Kroom is going to develop a process by which this board will be guided in its quest to find the best possible executive director for the agency.
Yes.
We have not defined how long or when that plan will be presented.
No.
And that's of some concern to me because we're talking about possibly in 9 months and maybe even longer. So help me get to where we need to be.
I will. In my view, if this motion carries today, I would not only advise Dr. Kroom of our decision and our acceptance of her offer to us, but ask her to come to the December board meeting to have exactly this conversation and bring us her best thinking about how long a plan takes, the way in which she would consider that plan, to hear and have our input regarding external searches and external search firms and whatever is necessary. My thinking is that we should answer as many of the questions you asked, if not all of them, at our meeting in December, which is now 3.5 weeks away. And that would hopefully put us on track to hit the first of the year with a report from the interim director as to the work of the agency and a search that kicks off based on the plan and the input of the board now in 3 weeks.
Okay, thank you. I'm a bit more comfortable.
Good, thank you.
And so I also think it's fair that if we, as a result of this conversation, and part of our next conversation with Dr. Kroom is to really say that very specifically. We'd like for you to present a one-page outline of your plan to get us to whatever the process to be making a final decision. And we need to, and I think we should say by June 30th. Now, who knows whether or not we can do that, right? But we should be asking her, show us a plan to get us to a position where we've selected someone by June 30th, because if they have other employment, they have, there's a whole bunch of other things, that timeline. But I do think it's fair, Commissioner Coleman, that we go into that conversation saying, you don't come in with something open, time is of the essence, and that is the belief of the board, and you should present a plan that reflects time is of the essence, and June 30th as really kind of sort of we're now down to the final candidates, 1, 2, or 3 by June 30th.
Thank you. And that kind of gives me more confidence because I've seen these processes go on and on and on to the detriment of people and particularly the agency. So that even if these are just very broad parameters, I'm a bit more comfortable.
Good. Well, I'm comfortable for an additional reason. Your chair does not have any desire for this to go on and on. And the only person that I have a high level of confidence, feels more strongly about that than do I, is Saul Solomon, who I am absolutely confident, without asking him, has no desire and in fact has every incentive for this process not to go on and on, so that he can have the second Coleman going away party sooner rather than later. It depends on how nice the party is that is done for Jim, but I think he'll be looking forward to that. Are there other questions or comments? Are you ready to vote?
Yes.
Thank you. We will call the roll. Mr. Solomon, I think I did a very good job, but I think you do better.
You did. It'll be hard to improve upon it.
Aye.
Commissioner Vaden.
Aye.
Commissioner Ansari.
Aye.
Commissioner Coleman.
Aye.
Commissioner Batts. Commissioner Batts. Commissioner Campbell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Barrows is not here, so we have 5 in favor, 1 absent. Motion passes.
All right, and you adopt. There is one further resolution from the Management Review Committee, which I described a moment ago. The Board of Directors hereby appoints the Management Review Committee of MDHA with input from the entire MDHA board to be the primary interface with Dr. Kroom in connection with the search process for a new executive director. That is the resolution, and I, as chair of the Management Review Committee, I make that motion now. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Ansari. Now, as by way of beginning the discussion, if more is needed, I will say to you that resolution is carefully worded. This is to be the primary interface, but there is nothing in that process that precludes other interfaces from the board, either with Dr. Kroom or throughout the process. So I want to be clear that this is intended to be the primary point of contact, but it absolutely, as I hope you found, and from her report, it will not be the exclusive contact. She is a force that will not be restrained or contained by a resolution like this. So is there other discussion or questions? Are you ready to vote?
Commissioner Purcell.
Aye.
Commissioner Faden.
Aye.
Commissioner Ansari.
Aye.
Commissioner Coleman.
No.
Commissioner Batts.
Aye.
Commissioner Campbell.
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries 5 yes, 1 no.
All right. Is there any old business? We're back on the agenda. Now that completes the report of the Management Review Committee. At this point, I don't think there's anything more for us to say. So I move on to old business, agenda item 5.
Yes, I want to thank the Management Review Committee for the work they've done, and particularly the committee that Dr. Kroom's headed. And I just had one question. I really appreciated the report, and they identified or suggested that they had contacted or engaged with 40 individuals or associations or what have you. And there was no appendix that contained those. And I was wondering if it were possible to have those, because usually reports like that do have a list of the contactees.
We could do that. Or if you would like, I would certainly, and I would be very comfortable with your calling Dr. Kroom.
Okay, no problem.
Which
Just get a number and stuff.
Which you're allowed to do. And I think she would love to talk to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions or comments? That's on old business. Now we're.
Wait a minute, hold on. I don't know if this is old business or not, but I need clarification. Bishop Campbell does work in zip code 37208, very good work. And our church is in 37208, and I need to talk to him about that work. Is that allowed? Has nothing to do with MDHA.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Bishop, I'll be in touch with you.
I'm glad you asked. Do you know that? Do you know how much that cheers up our lawyer that you asked that question?
Why?
You can't see it through his mask. Well, it means that the ethics training worked.
Oh.
And the chair has a nice smile too.
I'm very happy. No, I'm very happy. That cheered me up altogether. I look forward to even more ethics. Okay. Not till next year though. Any other question on old business or new business? That was probably somewhere in between old and new business. Is there any other business to come before this board? If there is not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
There's a motion to adjourn by Commissioner Ansari, seconded by Commissioner Coleman. In discussion, let me say how much I, as your chair and your colleague and your neighbor, how much I thank all of you for the work that brought us to this point. This is not a simple time for any board or any agency. I think from the report of Jim, we have a good sense of where we are, but the future is as unknown today as it would be at any other point, but more so in important ways. And knowing that you're here and we're together and we have this kind of consensus and support in all that we do means more than I could possibly tell you through a computer camera. But I will continue to try. And to Commissioner Ansari and Commissioner Thaden, who have been meeting week after week and sometimes twice a week, I am in your debt, as is this board. And then to all who have been part of this process, including the committee that Dr. Kroon put together. There'll be lots of opportunities to thank, but just know that today, on this Friday, on this occasion, I'm especially thankful to all of you for all that you do and are doing. It wouldn't happen without you. I'm going to be meeting with the staff at 1 o'clock today, I believe, and so Mr. Solomon will be meeting with them as well. Many of them are on this call. We can't see their faces, all of them, but we know they're there, and we're going to work hard to make sure the agency understands the work of this board and what the future holds, and that will occur in another 30 minutes. So that's Commissioner Coleman.
Yes, I know the meeting is adjourned. Will this be communicated to the public about our interim or anything like that?
Yes, no, we haven't adjourned yet. If we had adjourned, I couldn't talk to you. So we've not adjourned. Like you could talk to Commissioner Campbell, but I can't talk to you about the work of the board. We're still in the discussion of the adjournment. And the answer to that question is yes. The staff first, and then a press release will go out this afternoon explaining to the community about the interim director as well as about Dr. Kroon. I mean, one of the things I think the community, and this is your chair, I hope you agree, is to understand everything that we've done and begin to think also about the fact that Dr. Kroon will be out there developing this plan for us and helping us move forward. And I hope once again that when the community looks at our work and the public face, the forward facing of that work, that they will have a comfort about this board and its desires. And I'll say one more thing. Dr. Kroon's focus on the equity lens as we start this process spoke to me in a way that I hope is heard and received for the whole country. And I expect to keep that out front. So that said, is there any further discussion concerning the adjournment? Mr. Solomon has previously ruled that we can adjourn by voice vote. If that's not true, it means we're in constant session all the time. But let's assume that Mr. Solomon's legal advice is correct. All those in favor of adjournment say aye.
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 All those opposed? And we are adjourned. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.